This video is sponsored by OM System.
Isn't it nice when down the line you realize you were always fine? Isn't it nice when you breathe in cause you're finally free from the compromise?
I've been a working photographer for 8 years, and after all this time, I feel like I've tried most formats of photography in terms of digital photography, like full frame, APS-C, medium format, but the one format I had never delved into was Micro Four Thirds. And that was the case even in 2025 until OM System reached out and asked me if I wanted to try out the OM3, and OM System was gracious enough to lend me the camera for a couple months. And even though this video is technically sponsored by OM System, this OM3 right here, it's actually my own copy that I bought with my own money after my loan with OM System was over, just because I really enjoyed what Micro Four Thirds has and no other system has. So today I really just want to talk about things I really like about the OM3, but also Micro Four Thirds in general, because I think that a lot of people have a misconception that Micro Four Thirds is like a lesser system or format, which I don't think is the case. And by far my favorite thing about the OM3 is basically the design. And honestly, I don't gravitate towards a lot of silver cameras unless they're like actual film cameras, and even then I'm not a huge collector of film cameras, but this is such a unique, in 2025 seems like it's getting more and more popular again, but this type of design, it not just harks to the beginning of photography with film photography, but also I think it comes back to a time where design mattered more, and that wasn't just about functionality, but also the way a camera feels in your hand and how it makes you feel when shooting the camera. And not just the look of this camera, but also the build quality. It reminded me so much of the Nikon ZF, so much so that I ended up selling the Nikon ZF because how small it is, and it still keeps the same build quality that I kind of crave from most of my cameras. And honestly, it shocks me how light this camera is because it's built so well. Like, the materials feel really premium. The top is metallic. A lot of cameras nowadays, they tend to get more and more plasticky. And honestly, I get it, because as photographers and working photographers and videographers, we want our gear to be lighter and lighter so it doesn't feel like we're carrying a bunch of stuff all the time. But I think it also says a lot about a company when they take pride in the materials that they use. Like, this camera is so small, but it's also weather sealed, which is something that some modern cameras just omit, just because they're trying to hit a weight limit, or the materials don't allow to it, or the size doesn't allow to it. Like, I just really like the fact that it doesn't have a lot of compromises in that sense. I've watched other videos from other photographers who have this camera, and they've said a couple of them have said that people stop them and ask them what kind of film camera it is. And honestly, it's happened to me before. I was in Palm Springs with one of my friends. We went out to dinner, and this older dad came up to me and he asked me, "Oh, what film are you shooting with?" And I was like, this is a digital camera. And so I went down like a rabbit hole with them, like, oh, it's OM Systems, it's a different camera company, but they do digital cameras. And so he was super interested in like what this camera was, even though he had no idea it was a digital camera. So I think that's something that attracts a lot of people to be curious about this camera because of how good it looks. And honestly, the weight of it is the main reason why I carry this camera with me everywhere. And I've been shooting with it a whole bunch. I take it to Disneyland with me and my family. I take it on day trips. I shot this when my wife's birthday. So a lot of special occasions, I usually either bring a bigger camera or just my cell phone. This camera kind of fulfills all of those needs. And kind of bringing back the size, this lens that I have with it, it's a 17mm f1.8 lens. And the size of this lens is so small. And honestly, if you're familiar with my channel, I always say how small hands I have, but this lens is tiny. So having a fast prime on this body, I think it just goes a long way, because I'm not sacrificing light in order to keep the weight down. I can just have one fast prime with me. This is technically like a 35mm focal length in full frame terms. And honestly, this lens kind of stays glued to my camera because it's just how good it is and how much I enjoy the photos that come out of this lens. Another big reason why I chose to buy the OM3 for myself is how good the JPEGs look right out of camera, because I do want to have a solid look without feeling like it's like overly processed. And I think the OM system way of dealing with this kind of thing allows me to dial it in exactly how I want it. So I kind of want to run down what that looks like in my own special recipe that I've developed. And you know, all these examples I'm showing right now, they're shot with my profile, and it's, I want to have some saturation and some punch without losing like the essence of what that scene was. And I still shoot raw plus JPEG, so if I want to play with the file further in post, I can still do that, but this allows me to have a JPEG I actually really like right out of the camera. So if you're not familiar with the OM3, it has this creative dial in the front that allows you to have profiles that you want to have for your JPEGs. So I've seen a lot of videos where people have multiple profiles for their camera, but I like to keep things a little bit simple, because if I have a lot of options and tons of like different profiles in camera, it just, I feel like I end up making them and not using them. So I only have one that I really dialed in, I really like. So I'm gonna wanna share what that looks like in camera. So as my base, I started with the color 1 profile. And as you can see here, you get a bunch of different color profiles here. But the only one that I've kind of dialed in is on color 1. So color 1, this is basically the way that I have my color chart here set up. The main way that I set up this camera is through the second option here, and I adjusted all of these different colors because I tend to gravitate towards certain colors that I want it to be more vibrant or less saturated. So this is basically what I have it with. So like this allows me to still have the colors that I really like without like totally making the skin tones all over the place. So this is basically my first page. Another one of my favorite things about the OM system specifically is that you also get control of your curves. And if you're someone who likes to control your highlights and your shadows and really dial those in, it really allows you to do that. So not just your shadows, but also your midtones and your highlights. And kind of like a pro tip, because I was so lost the first time I did this, I don't really touch the shading, but I do like to lower the sharpness and the contrast, because I do want to dial those back in using the curves, or like in post if I really want to like really dial it in on my phone or something. It just gives me a little bit more flexibility that way, but honestly you can't go wrong either way. And honestly, another feature that I did not expect to use very much on this camera is the live ND feature. And because I don't really like to carry on ND filters, I find them cumbersome, I lose them all the time, or I scratch them. So I basically stop using them unless I'm doing videography work. I don't really use them for photography, but having that in camera helps out a lot, because like for instance, I go to theme parks all the time, especially Disneyland. So the other day, like a couple weeks ago, I was there and I really wanted to get motion of the scene, and it was daytime, and I remember that this camera had live ND, and I thought haven't really played around with it, and I really wanted it for the photo. So I did a couple of different shots of different rides, and I just think it's such a great feature because it allows me to be creative in other ways that I can't always do because of the fact that I shoot a lot during daytime and I don't really like carrying ND filters. And honestly, I really like to customize my cameras, but I also don't like where the buttons are kind of all over the place or in different or weird placements. The way I have my camera customized is not like super in depth, but a lot of these buttons I really like to remap. Like for example, this button up here, I remapped it to the digital teleconverter because I do use that quite often, because my favorite lens on the system is a 17mm, and by having the digital converter, it allows me to get a little more reach in my images. And I honestly use it so much that I wanted a dedicated button for it. The other button I remapped is the function button here, and it's basically for my ISO. So usually for me, I like to have that option to be able to switch it as fast as I can. And honestly, since my last video, I still have the dial here, or this switch, go between different focusing modes, and it's actually a super helpful way to set up this camera, because you go from single point autofocus to and then enable face tracking if you really want that. Besides that, the CP button here, I have it for high res mode because I have been wanting to try out the high resolution mode. This other button, I don't do back focusing, so I remapped it to white balance because I do want to have control over my white balance. And honestly, I don't customize this camera a whole bunch because the things that I like to use, I like to have full manual control over my scene. If I really want to shoot a little bit faster, I go on aperture priority. And that's basically the way I shoot with this camera. It's so compact and nice to shoot that I don't really feel like fiddling with a bunch of different things, but I like to know that there's options if I wanted them. And I already touched on the advantages of Micro Four Thirds earlier in the video, but I kind of really just want to bring in some points home about why I chose to invest in Micro Four Thirds in 2025. And honestly, it's just the lightness of everything. This is such a capable package and in such a compact form factor that it makes me want to shoot more photos in different ways that I normally would. Again, this 17mm lens is amazing. I also have this 12 to 45 zoom lens, and this thing is so tiny. It's a 12 to 45, and in full frame terms, if you are only coming from full frame, 12 to 45 is basically like a 24 to like 90 millimeters in like such a small form factor. It really is a no-brainer for me to like bring a zoom lens and not just a prime lens if I'm out shooting all day, if I'm out with my family and stuff. Like it really is a no-brainer to bring an extra lens because of how light and compact it is. Overall, I've been really enjoying shooting with the All-in-3 and exploring what Micro Four Thirds kind of has to offer. And honestly, it's something that I really missed out on having in my kit before, but it's not something I want to let go of anytime soon.